At the Valley of the End, Naruto's life is cut short by Sasuke, but what if his death wasn't the end? What if Kami herself brought him back with a divine hammer, and Tenten became the one who truly stood by his side? Let's explore this powerful what if. Chapter 1. Naruto sat on the ground beside his body and tried to keep the tears from flowing. He had tried so hard to bring Sasuke back for Sakura and yet nothing ever went right. Now here he was, dead or close to it, face down in the mud from a Chidori to the heart. He hadn't been fast enough to dodge this time. He looked across the field to find Sakura helping along a limping Kakashi. His only regret was that he couldn't bring that idiot back for her. No, that wasn't true. He had other regrets. Never seeing his friends' faces again, never eating ramen again, never training to exhaustion again, never seeing Ba-chan again. There was so much regret and nothing could be done. He watched as they picked up his body with no words exchanged between them. Guess in the end I wasn't even worth a few final words. Wonder when the Shinigami will get here. A bright light seemed to engulf the field they were in and Naruto looked to see if Sakura and Kakashi had noticed it. They just kept walking, away from him and out of his life. He closed his eyes one last time and let the tears fall freely. His last hurrah had been a big bang at least. If he ever did anything right he took the fox with him. His lips barely turned up at the corner of his mouth and he opened his eyes to find pure white everywhere. No matter which way he turned it was white except for a fox-shaped mark of black underneath him. Everywhere he walked the mark stayed with him, right underneath him. Interesting isn't it? He whipped around to find the source of the voice and saw a girl his age standing behind him. She didn't look older than 17 and yet, she had a wizened look to her, like she had seen it all and done it all. An aura of calm exuded from her and Naruto felt at peace. If death included pretty girls like this one, he was okay with dying. He cocked his head and stared at the beauty in front of him, studying her. Her hair was black and hung in curls down to her mid-back. Her skin was pale and yet seemed luminescent and warm. The smile that graced her face was almost motherly in a sense and Naruto felt safe when he looked at her. Surely this girl meant him no harm. Who are you? Where is this place? Why am I here? Am I dead? One question at a time, young one. Now what do you want answered first? Young one. I'm sorry miss but you look as old as me. The girl laughed at this and it was melodious, the laughter seeming to hang and tinkle in the air. It was enjoyable. You flatter me young man. My age cannot be measured in numbers. I guess you could say my age is infinity. Are you an angel? Better. You mortals know me as Kami. Naruto's eyes widened and the look that crossed his face caused Kami to look at him with distress. The orange-clad ninja immediately fell to his knees and hung his head. Perplexed, Kami asked him what he was doing. Forgive me Kami-sama, I meant no disrespect. I am sorry, please forgive me. I am not worthy to be in the presence of one such as you with all the blights on my soul. Please pass judgment on me and let me be on my way to wherever you deem fit in hell. Kami frowned at this. Was this what mortals did to each other in their spare time? Tear each other down until they questioned their own self-worth and were willing to damn themselves for sins they never committed. Why do you say those things, Naruto? Surely you don't believe that. The spots on my soul are from the fox. I know this. It's been explained to me several times that I am bound to the fox and he to me. Our souls are bound together and therefore his sins are my sins. Nothing I could do would make up for his sins and therefore I deserve to be punished. Please Kami-sama, I deserve no less. Kami strode the distance to the young man on his knees and knelt in front of him. She offered a small smile and placed her hand on his cheek. When he still wouldn't lift his gaze, she cupped his chin and lifted his eyes to hers. He kept his eyes screwed shut, tears streaming down his cheeks. Her heart ached to see a child such as him, a human sacrifice, ready to accept punishment for things he never did. His place in heaven had been assured long ago. Naruto, open your eyes and look at me. Let me tell you where we are right now. We are at the junction between the living and the dead. You are neither dead nor alive right now and you are not being judged. True, your soul is bound to the foxes but only as two prisoners are fettered together at the ankle. One prisoner does not answer for the deeds of the other, they are merely chained together until their jailer brings the key. I am sorry Naruto, but your key is not yet ready to be used. You must keep your burden a while longer. Now rise and speak with me. I have something to ask of you. Naruto stood and wiped the tears from his face. He looked at Kami apologetically and asked where they were. We are in a plane made of your soul. You have heard of yin and yang, correct? The light contains some dark and the dark some light. This is how balance is kept. Where we stand and all around us is your soul, Naruto. The fox-shaped blemish on your soul is that of Kyuubi, and he stays under you because he is bound to you. Look around you, Naruto, and you will find that your soul is pure with nearly no blemish. You are as pure as they come, and that is why you are perfect for the task I must set before you. What is it you seek of me, Kami-sama? Ask and I shall do anything you require of me. Kami smiled, seeing that the boy she had watched since he was young was slowly coming back. Deciding to act the part of a young girl for a moment and not the benevolent creator, she joked with him. Burn that outfit. It's hideous. Naruto stood with wide eyes and wider mouth, making Kami giggle. When he spoke it was hesitant and faltering. But orange is your gift to the world, Kami-sama. Why would you want me to destroy something as beautiful as my suit? Oh Naruto, you can't take a joke. That isn't my request. Although I do wish you would get rid of that thing, and I will send someone later to tell you what I wish you to wear as my emissary on earth. I need you to find a certain soul and send him to me. His crimes are of a heretical and most unholy nature. You will act as my liaison and claim his soul for me. You want me to act as a Shinigami. Don't you already have someone for that job? Of course, but he has to follow certain rules, unlike you. I give you full reign to act as you see fit. Consider the power I give you as another test on your life and soul. When you return after your life is over, we shall see if the fox is the only visible blemish on your pure soul. Now then, I'm going to give you a weapon to help you on your path. You'll receive it when you regain consciousness and are ready. I'm not ready now. No, you will be weak when you wake up. Rest and gain your strength. When I think you are prepared, I will send my messenger to deliver my gift and help you choose clothing appropriate for my emissary. Goodbye for now, Naruto. We will see each other soon. The next thing Naruto knew, he was back in his body and it felt heavy and his breathing was labored. His eyes fluttered open and he saw light filtering in through a window. He was lying in a bed in the hospital and he was hooked up to various machines. He slowly turned his head to look at the bedside table. No cards or anything greeted him. He sighed. It was always the same. He might have friends, but they were too busy to visit him. He closed his eyes and lay back again. Might as well rest up and get ready for what lay ahead. His rest was short-lived when he heard familiar footsteps clomping down the hall and knew he was in for a tongue lashing. Tsunade opened the door and stood at the end of the bed, checking Naruto's chart. She cocked an eyebrow and sighed. Naruto, you're not fooling anyone. I can see by the heart rate monitor that you're awake. We need to talk. Naruto cracked one eye open and stared at Tsunade. He loved the old woman to death, but he really just wanted to rest for once. He'd been through a lot in the past few days and that dream about Kami was kind of unsettling. He didn't know if he believed it or not. He didn't remember coming back to Konoha, perhaps he never left and it was all just a dream. All right, Ba-chan, what do you want to talk about? Your battle with Sasuke. What happened? Sakura and Kakashi didn't tell you. He stabbed me through the chest with a Chidori. End of story. I passed out and they drugged me back, I guess. Well, you should be good to go in a couple of days. You can be released then. Rest until then, you hear? I'd like nothing better. I mean it, Naruto, you'd better. Did you just agree with me? Yes. Don't go insane on me, brat. I can't be the only sane one in this hellhole of a village, all right? I need you to stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, Ba-chan. I'm right here with you, forever. Tsunade softened her glare when he said that. No matter how much she hated the moniker Ba-chan, it still made her feel good that he viewed her as a normal person and not the Hokage. Just get rested, kiddo. We need you out there again. Hi. I think for once I will take it easy. Three days passed and Tsunade finally released Naruto from the hospital with the condition that he take it easy and not overtrain or overexert himself. He stood in the training grounds of Team 7 going through the motions of trying to loosen his muscles back to trainable condition. It would take some time, but he'd be back to top form in a couple of days. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see a man in white robes, his short brown hair blowing in the breeze, but there was no breeze. On his shoulder was a massive hammer, a war hammer, the likes of which had never been seen. He smiled at Naruto and offered a hand. "Hello young one. My name is Sanosuke. I am the go-between for you and Kami-sama. I hope to be good friends with you. You have a lot of promise, you know." Naruto, meanwhile, was staring blankly at the man. He had hardly heard a word. He could only think that it hadn't been a dream, it was real, it was all real, he had actually met Kami. His gaze swung from the man to the massive war hammer on his shoulder and took in its weird look. It wasn't fancy by any means. The head of the hammer was a simple block of steel with golden bands around both ends. The handle was steel and it seemed that the entire hammer was poured from the same mold. Leather thongs wrapped around the hilt of the handle and formed a comfortable grip. Sanosuke smiled at Naruto and swung the hammer to the ground where it impacted and made a crater. "How heavy is that thing, Sanosuke? It must weigh a ton." "Hi, it does. But to you it will be as light as a feather. It is made especially for you and is a holy weapon. This is one of Kami's gifts to you. If you prove worthy of her time, she will bestow upon you the remaining gifts. You are to learn how to use this hammer from your soul mate. She will guide you in its use and you will be happy in your life. But Sakura-chan doesn't wield weapons. She can't teach me how to use it." Sanosuke scowled at the mention of her name and thumped the hammer on the ground again, gaining Naruto's attention. "Now see here Naruto, the world does not revolve around your pink-haired friend. She is not your soul mate. There is another out there who is worthy of your time and devotion. She can train you in the art of weaponry. You know her already, she is here in this village." "Wait a second. Soul mate. I already told Neji I don't believe in fate, so why would I believe that I'm destined to be with a certain someone? You already think that, you fool. You keep pining over Sakura and she wouldn't be seen with you in public in that light. Your soul mate waits for you. You'll know who she is by the tightening of your heart and a deep connection. Have her teach you Kenjutsu, it will help you to wield the hammer better. They're basically the same property anyway. But why a hammer? Why not a sword?" Sanosuke smiled at his young charge. He wasn't as stupid as he let on, he just refused to acknowledge the obvious. It wasn't stupidity that held Naruto back, it was inattentiveness and immaturity. "This hammer is young Naruto, it was only recently made and it was made for you. We made it fashioned after your soul. Right now the hammer is blunt and dull, screaming for attention with the two golden bands, and since you have no knowledge of how to wield it, it will be a challenge to train. This reflects you in your earlier years. You had promise, just as this hammer has promise. I told you it is a holy weapon and that is true, but it is also connected to you at the soul. As your soul evolves, so too shall the hammer." "You mean it'll change on its own?" "Yes, overnight while you sleep it will begin its transformation. It will begin to reflect your soul now. Now come and accept your weapon Naruto, we have something else to do." Naruto strode forward and hefted the hammer with ease. He was amazed at how light it was and swung it a few times to get a feel for it. Noticing that Sanosuke was getting antsy, he swung the hammer to his shoulder and grinned. "So what's task number 2? Sanosuke grinned evilly at the young man before him, causing Naruto to begin to sweat. This part would be his favorite. He thanked Kami-sama for the opportunity to rid the world of yet another eyesore. "I'm the one who's also taking you clothes shopping. You must dress appropriately if you are to be Kami-sama's liaison in this world. Nothing but the best, and I have just the idea for your battle garb. Come. Naruto took the stairs in stride as he and Sanosuke walked to the tailor. It was usually bad enough, but since he was carrying a giant war hammer, he was really getting looks now. He sighed and just kept going. Hopefully, Sanosuke wouldn't torture him too bad with dorky clothes. His traveling companion just trudged along, thinking about all the things to make his charge look like a servant of Kami, to look more like an angel. The man in the clothing store raised an eyebrow at the two men and politely asked Naruto to leave his weapon of mass destruction outside the store. The looks of the villagers when the massive weapon hit the ground was priceless, and Naruto hung around at the door for a moment to watch some try to pick it up. When even the biggest man around couldn't budge it, he was satisfied that his holy weapon was safe and that no one else could touch it. He stepped back into the entrance and found Sanosuke talking to the tailor, who seemed intrigued by the man's ideas. "Do you understand what I want? It must be in the design I gave you and of the best material. Price is no object. Until the battle gear is prepared, however, we need some temporary clothing to get rid of this abomination. What do you have in simple shinobi gear?" "We have many things, sir. Anything in particular you would like? Just size him up for everything in black. Loose, but fitting, and get him some actual boots instead of sandals, steel-toed if possible. He'll thank me later. Now then, Naruto, kindly let the man measure you so we can get this over with. He informed me that once measurements were taken your battle garb would be finished within the week. He'd call for you then and you can pick it up. How am I going to pay for all this? I don't have enough on me to cover it. Do not worry, young one. Kami will provide. Have faith in Kami." His measurements were taken without fail and Naruto was starting to get just a bit agitated. He hated sitting still in one spot so often, but he had been strangely serene in the past few days, like he had calmed down slightly. Sanosuke noticed the conflict within the boy and spoke up. "I see you have noticed that you can think a bit more clearly than before. Your meeting with my master did that. She has a most calming effect on the mind, and in your case it seemed to help your cognizant thought process. You should meditate and try to talk to her again. I believe it would be beneficial. Perhaps. I might try it later tonight. I like the feeling of being able to think clearly. It's nice. Indeed. I must go now, Naruto. I shall see you again soon, I hope. Remember what I said about your soul mate. Find her and cherish her. Do not let yourself be taken in by false hope of a love that can never be requited. Goodbye for now." And the man disappeared without a puff of smoke or anything. He just ceased to exist on this plane. No smoke. I'll have to get him to teach me that when I see him again. The week passed quickly for Naruto and he spent it in seclusion for the most part, training by himself in a remote part of the village, finding out how to at least basically handle the holy weapon before he sought out his soul mate. When he grew bored he meditated, trying to reach Kami and talk with her once more. She must have deemed him not ready to speak to her again since he never contacted her or Sanosuke once. At the end of the week he got a summons to come back to the tailor. His battle garb was ready and he had several of them made. He had worried about how to pay for his new clothing, but as Sanosuke said, Kami will provide, and the money mysteriously made its way into his bank account. He took the wrapped bundle of cloth and made his way back to his apartment to try on his new look. Deciding he didn't want to get his clothing dirty just yet, Naruto took a shower and let the water cascade over him, washing away his troubles. He smiled as he thought about his hammer. He simply left it outside his apartment, since no one was strong enough to steal it. He chuckled as he thought about the looks on people's faces when he swung it to his shoulder and walked off like it was a feather. I love messing with people. His shower over he stepped out and opened the bundle. What he saw brought a smile to his face. While his temporary clothes, as Sanosuke called them, were plain, they still looked good on him, better than the orange. His new battle garb made him look like an angel. It consisted of white pants and a white gi made of silk that flowed about his body. A blood-red sash tied at the waist that seemed to move of its own accord held the gi together. The small breeze generated by the air conditioning system made the sash flap and flutter like he stood in a hurricane. It was no doubt there to draw the attention of the enemy. What surprised him the most, however, were the markings on the back of all the GIS. A yin-yang circle encompassed most of the back, but instead of a dot showing the good or evil, there was the body of a nine-tailed fox, its tail splayed out on display. He fell in love with it instantly. He may hate the fox, but this was obviously Kami approved and there was nothing wrong with that. He smiled and laid the clothing out for use the next morning. He'd definitely surprise Tsunade when he showed up in her office. True to form, Naruto kept turning heads as he walked through the streets carrying his monstrous hammer. It hadn't changed yet like Sanosuke said it would, but then again, good things come to those who wait. Nothing the angel had said had been a lie yet, so perhaps he just underestimated how the hammer was evaluating Naruto's soul. Naruto did notice that not all the looks were glares, however. More than a few girls were blushing and he could just faintly hear them whispering about the hot blonde guy. He smirked and kept going to the Hokage tower. Today was gonna be a good day. Tsunade was busy with her paperwork for once when she heard Shizune arguing with someone outside the door. Focusing some chakra to her ear, she listened in. Don't care, you're not bringing that thing in there. Leave it outside, Naruto. I'm not playing around. If you drop it, it's going to go through all the floors. I'm not gonna drop it, Shizune, it'll stay on my shoulder the whole time. And besides, Ba-chan's a busy woman. I'll just show her what I got and be on my way. No big deal. Now let me through. Put that hunk of metal back outside. Shizune, move. Well, that was a shocker. Naruto is never forceful with Shizune. She usually gets her way by bossing him around like an older sister, but the brat must have something important to tell if he resorted to yelling at her. Tsunade's thoughts were broken as the door opened and Naruto had to duck to get inside. Shizune followed him, to remind him not to drop the damn thing and put a hole in the floor. One destructive blonde in the Hokage office was enough. Her piece said. Shizune left out in a huff. Naruto sighed, he'd have to do something nice for her later for yelling at her. He turned to address Tsunade but found her instead poking and prodding his hammer. What the hell is this thing, Naruto? Have you and Tenten been playing around in the old weapons shed again? No, and we don't play around in there. We search for old weapons that she can resharpen or remold into better weapons. This is mine. It's a holy weapon given to me by Kami. Since when did you become religious, kid? I didn't. It's a gift from Kami to help me find a certain soul she wants. It's enchanted so only I can pick it up. Here, try to lift it off my shoulder. Try as she might, Tsunade couldn't budge the damn thing. And she had picked up Gamabunta's Kodachi. The thing must be enchanted. But how Naruto ended up with an enchanted weapon was beyond her. Damn, kid had all the luck. Well, the weapon is dull like you, but what about the clothes? I like the new style, Naruto, it's definitely you. Thanks, it was a gift from a new friend. He said my jumpsuit was hideous and burnt it once I got my new clothes. Well, where is he? I want to give him pay for an S-ranked mission. That's been on the pay scale for quite a while to rid the world of that damn jumpsuit, and someone finally had the balls to do it. You know, I've actually outlawed the sale of orange jumpsuits in Konoha because of you. But orange is the color of the gods. It's a gift from Kami herself. Herself? I thought Kami was a guy. Naruto shrugged and gave a sheepish grin. She appeared to me and told me that she was neither, but I'm more at ease around women, so she appeared as a young girl. Real cute too. Too bad she's so much older than me, she'd be worth the effort. You'd actually hit on Kami. Naruto, you're insane. But that's what I like about you. Now get out of here and go train with your weapon. I have things to do. Before I get out of your hair, I have a favor to ask. I need time off to find my soulmate, who's going to train me in the way of using the hammer by teaching me kenjutsu. Okay. Tsunade just raised an eyebrow and nodded dumbly. First the kid defies death, now he's Kami's right-hand man or something. Fuck this job, I'm too old for this shit, she thought. Hitting the page button on her intercom, she called Shizune. Shizune, bring some sake and 2 cups. I think you and I are going to need to be shit-faced before the day is over. A soft voice came back over the intercom and Tsunade was surprised to hear her assistant answer in such a manner. After seeing that big-ass hammer he's lugging around, I went and bought a few bottles of good stuff. I think you and I are going to be holed up doing paperwork for quite a while. Ah, Tsunade thought, good old Shizune. She always comes through. And damn that brat for always giving me a headache. It was then Tsunade realized her mistake and slammed her head on the desk. She'd let the little bastard have an indefinite amount of time off, in the village, with nothing to do but train and look for his soulmate. She groaned audibly. That pile of paperwork was going to be a mountain with that kid running loose. Chapter 2. Naruto strode through town, wondering who his soulmate could be. He knew her obviously, but who could it be? He knew a lot of people and a lot of them were good with kenjutsu. Deciding to worry about it later, he made his way to the training grounds and began to swing the hammer around wildly, not knowing anything about grace. It just wasn't his style, and he still lamented the fact that he was given a hammer instead of a sword. A sword was sharp and pointy, able to do massive damage. What could this thing possibly do that a sword couldn't? It was so plain and dull. Naruto sat down in the middle of the field cross-legged with his elbow on one knee and his chin in his hand, the other hand holding onto the massive hammer. He looked out of the corner of his eyes at it and took it in one more time. The handle was a good 4 feet long and seemed to flow into the head. The head of the hammer was massive, roughly 2 feet by 2 feet square and about 3 feet long. It was no wonder he kept getting odd looks in town. He closed his eyes and thought about his situation now. He already had so much on his plate, what with saving Sasuke, and now he was expected to locate a renegade soul. He let go of the hammer and held his head in his hands. He was 16 years old. He held a demon that could destroy civilizations in his navel. He had just been informed by Kami herself that Sakura was not meant for him. It hurt, but he'd have to get over her and move on. He still had to save Sasuke for her. He'd made a promise and he never went back on those. He had to find his soulmate and learn the art of the sword so that he would be able to wield his hammer properly. Why did it always feel like the weight of the world was on his shoulders? Sighing heavily, he opened his eyes to find the world pitch black. It was night. He had been thinking so hard he hadn't noticed that night had fell. It was time to go home. Perhaps tonight his hammer would change. He swung the hammer to his shoulder and walked off toward his apartment. Naruto set the weapon down outside of his building with a loud thud and walked up the stairs. As he opened the door, he felt a presence and whipped 2 kunai at the shadowy figure. He heard the audible thump of the knives hitting home, flicked on the light, and found Sanosuke there with the kunai in his chest and a scowl on his face. Naruto grinned sheepishly as the angel removed the knives and bemoaned the ruination of his shirt. "I just had this thing cleaned, Naruto. Can you be any more problematic?" "Well, I'm sorry, but you surprised me. I couldn't help it. What are you here for anyway? I want to know why your hammer hasn't changed yet. It should have made its first change, and where is your hammer?" "Oh, I left it downstairs. I don't want it falling through the floor." "You idiot. That's why it isn't changing. You have to sleep with it in your hand. What in the hell made you think it could change if it wasn't by you? You may be connected at the soul with it, but you still have to have contact with it to make the change. And you wonder why everyone calls you an idiot. I'm not stupid. You don't think before you do things. Sigh, Naruto, just get the hammer and sleep at the training grounds tonight. Sleep with the hammer in your hand and don't let go. If you prove yourself worthy by changing the hammer, I'll give you the other gift a little early." "Is it another cool weapon?" "No, it isn't cool, but it is a weapon, perhaps more important than the hammer. I won't tell you what it is though until you change the hammer. Now get going." "Oh Kami, why do you make me deal with these idiots?" The angel disappeared into thin air and Naruto grumbled while retrieving his hammer. He had just come from the training grounds and he didn't really want to sleep outside tonight. A shower in his bed sounded so much better, but he had to change the hammer. He trudged back to the training grounds and stopped at the first one he came to. He didn't care whose it was, they could wake him in the morning if he was in the way. He flopped down on the ground and stared at the stars. He held the hammer at his side and hummed while he twirled it in his hand. After a short time he began to yawn and eventually nodded off, his hand wrapped tightly around the hilt. It wasn't long before a weird dream started. In the dream Naruto was all alone and everything was black. Then came a bright light and the world was white and it reminded him of his soul when he spoke to Kami. Then came the people and there were crowds of them, but no matter how much he tried to get their attention, they ignored him and kept walking. He noticed that they all stared down and behind him as they walked by, before turning their noses up and continuing onward. Curious, he looked behind him to find that his shadow was that of a fox and no matter where he ran it followed, its 9 tails billowing behind it. Out of the crowd stepped an old man with a kind face, smoking a pipe with a funny hat on his head, and he was kind to Naruto, offering him encouragement. Naruto smiled at the old man and felt his heart lighten. He turned to his shadow and if it wasn't just his imagination, the fox had shrunk slightly. He turned around to face the old man and found another man there, this one younger with his hair pulled back into a strange ponytail. He also was kind to Naruto, but he was stern, demanding better from him than he offered. The rest of the crowd walked on by, but Naruto was content for the moment, he was at least noticed. Out of the crowd stepped another man, a young girl, and a young boy, and while they wouldn't talk to Naruto, they acknowledged his existence and stood staring at him. A little boy walked up and Naruto felt what was awe and admiration coming from him, and the fox shrank a little more. Next came a figure whose silhouette Naruto would never forget as long as he lived. It was that of an effeminate young man, and though he could not see the eyes, the sad smile told him everything he needed to know. Naruto's heart ached and he nearly cried. This had been the closest thing he had ever had to a friend, someone who could understand him, but as quickly as the boy appeared, he vanished, leaving a saddened Naruto, and the fox grew a little again. Out of the constantly surging crowd stepped 6 figures, kids his age, and they all acknowledged him. 3 more emerged, and one held for him a respect that only those who have bled and fought for acknowledgement could hold. This one was a friend he would treasure forever. The other boy held contempt for him while the girl was neutral, she felt nothing, but she noticed him. Behind the 9 children appeared 3 more adults, and they stared at him with kindness. And the fox shrank more. Then came 3 familiar figures, 2 more boys and a girl, but one boy strode forward and faced him with a maniacal grin, the shadow of a tanuki behind him. The 2 stood and their shadows fought for a moment, the fox and tanuki shades becoming more and more massive, before they both receded, and the 2 boys looked at each other and smiled, knowing they had found someone who shared their pain. It was at this time that Naruto felt a pain in his heart, and he saw the old man fade away, a sad smile on his face. In his place stepped another figure, a tall, broad-shouldered man with long hair. From behind him came 2 more women, and they looked at him and he was happy. These 3 saw him for who he was. And the fox shrank further. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the first boy begin to fade until he was little more than an apparition, there in spirit but gone from his life. His shadow still remained though, letting Naruto know that he could be saved, but the effort and cost would more than likely be great. The girl standing beside the boy saddened and looked about to cry. Naruto could do nothing but look on and feel helpless. And the fox grew a tiny bit. Then all the figures disappeared except the tall, long-haired man, and he and Naruto began to walk through the crowd. They walked and walked for what seemed like forever, and Naruto felt himself grow, the ground seeming to get further and further from his eyes, and the shadow of the fox grew as he did. The figures all came back, except now they were bigger, more mature, and they all looked on him kindly. He had made strides and now had more friends. The apparition of the boy had grown as well, but it had darkened as if tainted by evil. This confused Naruto and he wanted to save the boy. Before he could think, the boy with the tanuki shadow blinked out of existence and Naruto rushed to where he was, his heart heavy. As fast as he disappeared though, he reappeared, this time without the shadow of the tanuki, and Naruto was happy for his friend. He was a survivor. Out of all the figures though, he noticed that one seemed to be brighter or perhaps more defined than the others. The bun-haired girl that reminded him of a panda smiled at him and he felt his heart lighten. Things shifted again however, and another person showed up. This person was kind and patient with him and had a strange forehead protector. Along with him came a figure that reminded him of the apparition, but he had no personality and seemed to be fixated on Naruto's. While annoying, Naruto could see that all he needed was a friend to show him the way, and so he made his peace with the strange figure. Then one of the adults blinked out of existence and didn't return, and 3 of the figures his age were saddened deeply. One of the adult women, who was with child now, was also saddened by this. And the fox grew a bit more. The scene changed again and Naruto found himself, the first girl, and the first boy together again, but under dire circumstances. The shadow of the boy was dark and radiated evil, and in the shadow stood a completely dark figure, its soul so tainted with evil that the figure itself could not be seen, but it was identified by the way it held itself and its indistinguishable outline. The fox grew and grew until it threatened to overtake Naruto, but the man with the strange headgear saved him and the girl wept for him, and the fox receded. The scene changed one last time and Naruto found himself once again in front of the first boy. They fought and fought, neither having the advantage until Naruto, in his pity, didn't finish his blow and the boy once again tried to kill him. He remembered his meeting with Kami and meeting Sanosuke and getting his hammer. The outline of the one who was to be his soulmate flashed before him one last time before everything went dark again. And the fox was smaller than ever. In the blackness, Naruto floated, thinking over what he had seen. He knew only one thing and it was undeniable. I love you all and yet, I am strong without you. People come and people go and though my heart is heavy when you leave, it repairs itself and I too continue on. Forgive me everyone but I can no longer continue to play the fool for you. My soul and others depends on me succeeding in whatever Kami puts before me and I cannot fail. I make a solemn vow to you, my friends. Uzumaki Naruto will never abandon you, though some of you may abandon me. Whatever kindness you have given me in my short life will be returned tenfold and I shall hold you forever in my thoughts. But those who have ran to the darkness will no longer receive my mercy. My compassion, yes, my pity, yes, but no longer my mercy. Kami have mercy on your soul Sasuke, Orochimaru, because I surely will not. And the shadow of the fox grew smaller still. Outside of Naruto's mind, in the waking world, his hammer was reacting to its wielder's dream. It seemed to hum happily, ecstatic that its owner had come to a conclusion that was to its liking. Starting by the hand that held it, the hammer began to change. Its leather thong became thicker and plusher, more defined and had intricate designs seemingly burned into it. The magical transformation crept up the handle, turning the dull gray steel a dark black, with a white flame design licking up the side all the way to the head. The gold bands widened until they encompassed the head of the hammer like a cocoon. Slowly, cracks began to show until it burst, revealing the newly transformed war hammer. The body of the hammer was a pure white with intricate gold designs snaking around it, making it look like the holy weapon it was. The bands were gone, nowhere to be seen. On top of the hammer sat a large spike, as black as night, that reflected no light. The ends of the hammer remained flat, but around the edge of the ends was a sort of powder substance that shimmered in the light of the dawn. On either side of the hammer was the yin-yang symbol with the fox's shape instead of the dot. It was upon this scene that Tenten stumbled. She had seen Naruto around town with the massive hunk of metal but hadn't had the time to ask him about it. She loved all weaponry and seeing someone with such a rare weapon as a warhammer was a treat. Surely Naruto wasn't taking up the use of such a weapon, especially one so massive. She wasn't sure if he could even swing it. She had come early that morning to get started on her training and found a knocked-out Naruto. She had meant to wake him up but instead became entranced by the show his hammer put on. Surely, this was an enchanted weapon, the likes of which she had never seen and may never see again. He wouldn't notice, she'd just sneak up real quick and examine it, before waking him up and sending him on his way. She looked over the hammer and was enthralled by its design. The coloring of it was too mystical to be man-made and the shimmering around its edges was unnatural as well. She slid her finger over the powder-looking surface and felt her finger cut open. She pulled the digit back and looked at it in the dawning light. Blood. She inspected the powder closer and nearly gasped. It was diamond dust, with bits of diamond jutting here and there. If he connected with this hammer it would shred whatever it touched, if they got over being hit with the juggernaut of a weapon. Through examining the momentary object of her interest, she turned her gaze to Naruto, intent on waking him up. She couldn't do it. She just sat there, drinking up his looks. He had grown so much and had seen so much battle, and yet as he lay there, she thought she had never seen anyone look more innocent. She took in everything from how his hair blew barely in the small breeze to how his whisker marks had deepened over the years. She smiled when she saw his mouth slightly open and could see the elongated fangs whenever his nose twitched, lifting his upper lip. He looked so animalistic and yet so tame. She nearly giggled to herself, thinking about how such a formidable ninja could be such a teddy bear outside of battle. He could take down S-class nin without blinking an eye and yet Sakura could pound his ass into the ground without trying. He simply refused to hurt anyone he considered a friend. She scowled, thinking of the Uchiha. That's probably why they've never caught him. Naruto simply can't bring himself to harm the bastard. She leaned over him to wake him and found herself staring into his deep blue eyes. Her breath hitched and she nearly gasped. She had never really noticed how blue and beautiful they were. Coupled with that smile of his, she nearly melted in her shoes. She damn near overheated blushing, however, when he looked at her with half-lidded eyes and gave her a small grin. Wow, Cammy is so good to me. I get a hammer and a pretty angel as gifts. I'm truly blessed. Tenten passed out from a blood rush to the head, with a smile on her face. Ah, to be treated so romantically by my own imagination, thought Tenten. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She was always viewed as a tomboy. Too bad the blonde angel in her dream hadn't been real. If he was, she'd give anything to get to know him better. Somewhere, far away, she heard her name being called and she didn't want to answer the call. She wanted to stay with the blonde angel. No, don't make me get up yet. Hey Tenten, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend or anything. Please wake up. Tenten opened her eyes slowly, letting the light filter in as slowly as possible. She still had the image of the blonde angel on her eyelids, and as her brown eyes blossomed openward, that image was becoming more and more solid until she was staring him in the face. She blinked and rubbed her eyes and he was still there. Not thinking before she said anything, she said the first thing to come to mind. Seems Cammy answered my prayer. The blonde angel is still here. Now it was Naruto's turn to blush, but he didn't faint. He had far too much willpower for that. He instead opted to change the subject. So, what are you doing here so early, Tenten? I came to train early, but I found you lying here instead. I watched your hammer change. Is it enchanted? No, it's a holy hammer. It will change over time to suit my soul, I've been told. A man named Sanosuke gave it to me and told me to use it for Cammy's will. Wow, that's cool. Do you know how to use it? No. I'm supposed to find a certain someone to teach me how to use it, but I haven't found her yet. Her. You're getting a woman to teach you. I don't think there are too many people besides Tsunade-sama who could pick up that thing, and even then none use hammers. I'm the weapons mistress of Konoha and I don't even know how to wield hammers properly. Well, I'm actually supposed to get a certain someone to teach me Kenjutsu, and Sanosuke said it would help me use the hammer correctly. I just have to find someone. I could teach you. I'm one of the best swordsmen in the village. Oh no, I couldn't impose on you. No matter how much my heart tells me yes, tells me yes. Oh, it's no problem. I don't mind at all. It's no trouble. Please say yes, please say yes. I would suggest you say yes, Naruto. The young lady looks like she can become quite insistent and persuasive. Yeah, you're probably right, Sanosuke. What are you doing here? Sanosuke smirked and folded his arms. The boy's soulmate sat in front of him and he had yet to realize it. Oh well, that was a teasing for another day. Right now he had to inspect the boy's new hammer. He picked it up and spun it this way and that. Very impressive. The boy's soul was indeed a wondrous thing. No telling how far this hammer would evolve. He'd never seen a holy weapon take on such a look or form. This was, after all, the first holy hammer he'd ever seen. Very good, Naruto. You've unlocked the first of many forms for your hammer. I applaud you for the way your soul reflects on it. Beautiful and yet deadly. Judging from the diamond dust around the edge, it signifies your diamond in the rough status. You are a rare gem waiting to be discovered and shown to the world. I commend you yet again. Wow, thought both Naruto and Tenten, that was poetic. Now then, Naruto, I need to give you your second gift. Come, stand before me and clear your mind. Naruto stepped forward cautiously and did his best to clear his mind, thinking of nothing. Sanosuke put his hands to Naruto's temples and began his task of giving the boy his gift. He watched as Naruto gritted his teeth and bit back a scream, his facial features contorting in his whisker marks and teeth, flicking back and forth between demonic and normal. After several moments, Naruto fell back onto the ground panting and Sanosuke stood as if nothing passed. Tenten looked back and forth from one man to the other. What did you do to him? Sanosuke smiled at his young charge's unacknowledged soulmate and tapped his forehead. I just gave him his second gift from Cammy. Call it a jumpstart of his cognitive abilities. Now he shouldn't be so likely to jump into things without thinking. And maybe, just maybe, he'll see the pretty girl in front of him for what she really is. Make sure he stays out of trouble when he wakes up, okay? Bye bye. Without a sound, Sanosuke vanished from this world. Tenten stood in awe as the man had gone without a swirl of leaves or a poof of smoke. He just vanished, and it wasn't speed. She looked back down at Naruto and blushed again. Damn him for looking so handsome. Deciding to get this over with, she shook his shoulders, and for the second time that day watched as his eyes opened. She gasped and held him by the shoulders, looking deeply into his eyes, while he blinked and looked at her like she was crazy. Tenten. Not that I mind being held down by a pretty girl, but can you let me up? What do you find so interesting in my eyes anyway? Tenten reached over to her pack and pulled out a mirror and held it up to his eyes. He inspected his eyes for all of 2 seconds and dropped the mirror before picking it up again. What the hell did he do to my eyes? I don't know, but they're more beautiful than ever. Naruto stared at her with wide eyes. He had been told before that he had nice eyes, but he thought the people were just being that nice. Now here was a beautiful kunoichi telling him that his eyes were beautiful. He looked into the mirror one last time and was dumbstruck by the reflection. His eyes were still blue, but now they had 4 silver stars around the iris that seemed to shine with an ethereal glow. He handed the mirror back to Tenten and felt the tightness in his chest again when her hand brushed his. He remembered Sanosuke's words from days earlier and gave her a small smile. You know what, Tenten? If that offer to teach me Kenjutsu still stands, I'll take you up on it. Tenten merely nodded her head, but on the inside she was doing a victory dance. A chance to train someone in a new weapon and ogle them at the same time. Life was good. If there is anyone out there who would like to draw Naruto like I have depicted here, with his new GI and pants and the transformed hammer, please do so and send me either a pic or a link to it. If you prefer the other Narutos in the other 2 fics, I'll take that too. I'm begging you folks, I have no artistic talent. I need someone else to do it for me. Thanks in advance. Chapter 3. It was hard for Tenten to keep her focus when the boy in front of her was shirtless, had a body most would die for, and was swinging a massive hammer like it was a stick. She sighed, for what seemed the 100th time that morning. No matter how much promise he had, Naruto simply couldn't seem to get the stances right. He was simply too much of a free-form fighter, flowing with whatever worked at the moment. Naruto, stop, please just stop. Your form is horrible, you keep stepping out of the stances I show you, and for the love of Kami, don't just swing the hammer around. You have to use it like an extension of yourself. But Tenten, it is an extension of myself. It's connected to my soul. Can't get any more extensive than that. That's not the point, and you know it, Naruto. You have to listen to me if you want to do this right. Alright, let's try a different approach. I'm going to stand beside you and perform a kata, and I want you to mimic it perfectly. Anything less than perfection and we'll do it again and again until you have it right. Slave driver. You try having made a guy for a sensei and we'll see whether or not I'm being kind. Now do what I do, or else. Or else what? I don't know yet, but the general idea is you, me, and several pointy things aimed at sensitive parts. Now follow my lead. She stepped into her stance and stood still while he mimicked her. Good, that's a good start. Moving forward, she dipped the sword low and brought it back up in a sweeping, crescent moon motion, and watched out of the corner of her eye as he did the same with the hammer. The object wasn't to teach him how to use a sword, but how to wield the hammer so that it seemed second nature, so that he wasn't so awkward with it. Seeing him stumble out of what would have been a perfect kata at the last second, she sighed. It was going to be a long day. Lunchtime rolled around before they knew it, and Naruto decided to treat Tenten to whatever she wanted. Her choice was sushi, at the newest sushi bar in town and the most expensive. Not wanting to look like a cheap date, Naruto went along with it, inwardly cursing his chivalrous nature and the loss of Gama-chan's swollen belly. Tenten was to sushi what Naruto was to ramen. A glutton of the highest caliber and able to destroy wallets in a single stop. Sighing in defeat, Naruto followed the insistent bun-haired girl in, only to be escorted out by the owner, who told him to leave that behemoth of an elephant slayer outside. No problems there, a twist of the shoulder, a flick of the wrist, and a resounding boom, and the offending object was in its own little crater, not bothering anyone. Shrugging, he returned to his table, ignoring the owner's gaping. Tenten was thoroughly enjoying herself at the moment. She had good food, good drink, and the company of a very handsome blonde to keep her happy. The looks of jealousy that some of the younger girls in the restaurant kept throwing her was only making her smirk larger and more defined. Neji wouldn't have garnered this type of reaction, he was too quiet and unassuming, even if he was hot. Naruto, on the other hand, commanded attention, from his voice which was softer than normal thanks to that trick of Sanosuke's, to his wild look, to his gentlemanly treatment of Tenten. Their conversation was what kept her entertained the most however. She knew that he was a demon container from the time that they rescued Gaara, but she didn't know that the boy was so deep. So tell me Naruto, what are you going to do with that hammer? I can't imagine you just coming across an enchanted weapon by accident. Well, first it's a holy weapon, not an enchanted one. Second, I'll tell you later, once we leave here. Sigh, you're never going to believe me Tenten. You're going to think I'm insane. You rushed Neji, a master of the Byakugan, head-on and you expect me to think you're not insane. Naruto, there aren't many things you could tell me that would make me think you're off your rocker. Naruto grinned at that statement. If there was one fault to him, good or bad, it was his need and ability to prove people wrong. Wanna bet? After a lengthy explanation on his apparent death, his meeting with Kami, the angel Sanosuke who delivered his hammer, and his need to find his soulmate to have kenjutsu lessons, Tenten was, suffice to say, certifiably stunned. This boy was insane, scratch that, he was batshit loco. Nobody could be expected to believe everything that he said, and yet, Naruto was a contradiction unto himself. Here was a guy who had every reason to hate the world and want to kill everyone, but instead he was one of the happiest, sweetest, nicest people you could ever want to meet. You couldn't help but be uplifted by his spirit and a smile could only grace your face. No matter how hard you fought, she knew this from experience, she had seen Neji try too often to keep his scowl only to lose it. But Naruto was pushing the boundaries of her patience and her sanity. She'd have accepted the fact that he found the hammer by accident and that it had simply claimed him for its master. That was acceptable. Being told that you were the right hand of Kami on earth was not acceptable. It was blasphemous. Saying that your soulmate would train you in the art of swords to use a hammer was downright ludicrous. But on the other hand, Naruto was a Jinchuriki, a human sacrifice, jailer of the fearsome Kyuubi. Perhaps being Kami's own personal shinobi wasn't so far-fetched after all. Naruto, do you really expect me to believe all that? Really and truly? Sigh, Tenten, I don't expect you to believe anything you don't want to believe. I want you to believe me, as my friend. It's not that far a stretch after all, shinobi have near-death experiences all the time. I just happened to meet with the Kami. I'm a special case you know. Look, if you don't believe me, I'll find someone else to teach me kenjutsu. I don't want to bother you for a cause that seems unworthy. That statement bothered Tenten more than she thought it would. She had an irrational want, no, a need, to show him the way. Naruto walking away from her at this point was another thing that was not acceptable. Wait, let's not be hasty. It's not that I don't believe you, it's just a lot to take in. Give me a chance please. Please. Naruto sighed and rubbed his temples to relieve the pain of the building headache. He was deep in thought, a feat that used to be impossible, when he thought of the perfect idea. Tell you what, I'll have Sanosuke come again and you can talk to him yourself. Then you'll have to believe me. Back at the training fields, Naruto and Tenten stood awaiting Sanosuke. Well, Tenten stood while Naruto was meditating, a fact that still shook Tenten. Seriously, the guy was just as hyperactive as Lee and yet he was able to sit still long enough to go into a meditative stance. As if her day couldn't get any weirder, she thought she heard Naruto mumble a goodbye to someone as he stood up. He opened his eyes and she seemed to drown in the blue, the silver stars being the only buoys to keep her from getting lost in the oceanic depths. She came back to reality when he snapped his fingers in front of her face, effectively bringing her out of her self-induced coma. He'll be here shortly. He seems to think a great deal of you for some reason. He does. Well, I hope I don't disappoint him. Trust me young lady, you don't disappoint. In fact, you exceed my expectations. Both teenagers whipped around to see the brown-haired man with his hands behind his back, smiling at them. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Now what do you want to know? Remember that all of this is between you, me, and Naruto. Tenten pondered for a while before carefully choosing her question. Are you really an angel? Of course I am. How else could I have bestowed that gift upon Naruto earlier? I didn't see you bestow a gift. All I saw was his eyes change. That could be a very powerful, very suggestive genjutsu. Naruto sighed as she tried to take apart everything Sanosuke said. He decided to nip it in the bud. Tenten, it's not a genjutsu. You're good enough to dispel one if you sensed it. She blushed slightly at the praise but remained steadfast nonetheless. Her analytical mind was going non-stop at the moment. Prove to me that you're an angel. Do something angelic. Sanosuke raised an eyebrow and gave her a skeptical look. Like what, pray tell? I don't know. Part the waters, bring a dead person back to life, throw your voice, do something. Ninja can do all those things. It won't prove I'm an angel and you know that. Then tell me something only an angel would know. He smiled and leaned over and whispered in her ear. Her eyes got wider and wider and her face redder and redder. From embarrassment or anger Naruto couldn't tell, until she couldn't take it anymore and she slapped Sanosuke hard. Being an angel however, he didn't budge, just took the blow as it came. He smiled at a very red Tenten and winked at Naruto, who was most definitely not smiling at him. How come every man I meet is a freaking pervert? What did you say to her? Tenten took the moment to give Sanosuke a death glare and then turned her attention to Naruto. Never you mind what he said to me. I believe you okay. He's an angel and you're the right hand of Kami. I believe you. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go home and relieve some anger on the training posts in my backyard. I'll see you here tomorrow at 7. But Tenten, there's still light out. And you can pound the posts here. She wheeled around suddenly, her eyes aflame. I am going home. I am going to take out my frustration on my training posts. I am going to take a shower and then I am going to bed. Good night Mr. Uzumaki. I shall see you in the morning. And as for you, you tell him what you said an angel or not, you'll wish that you'd never been born, made, fuck it. You'll pay. And then she was gone. Naruto stood like a statue, frozen in place. Man, she's scarier than Sakura when she's pissed. I hope I can get along with her. I'm going to go back to training on that stance she taught me. I'll talk to you later Sanosuke. And thanks for talking to her. Sanosuke grinned and crossed his arms in front of his chest. You don't want to know what I said to her. Come on Naruto, show a sense of adventure. Live a little. Thanks but I'd rather live a lot. I've seen what a pissed off Tenten can do to Lee and I'm not going to have a kunai anywhere near my dangly parts. So just bugger off. Alright then, but you may want to ask her about that night when she. Naruto stuck his fingers in his ears and shut his eyes. La 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 I can't fucking hear you. Tenten was fuming when she got home. The training posts were soon reduced to nothing but sawdust and a very filthy and aggravated weapons mistress thought a bath would cool her down and help her relax. As soon as her muscles hit the water, the scowl disappeared from her face to be replaced with a slight upwards motion of the lips. She leaned back and just rested her sore bones. I wonder if I was too hasty leaving today. Sure, the angel pissed me off but that didn't mean I had to take it out on Naruto. I'll need to apologize to him tomorrow. Don't want to become another Sakura, always hitting him and talking down to him for no reason. This thought made her frown. She was nothing like Sakura. Whereas the pink-haired girl stood out in a crowd, Tenten hung back and was unassuming. Compared to some other kunoichi, Tenten was kind of plain. Simple brown hair, simple brown eyes. She looked down at her body and gave herself a once-over. Her body was very lithe, not built for power but for flexibility, the ability to hurl her weapons and use her natural feminine grace to her advantage. She was proud of her body and though she wasn't as ample as the Hokage, she was no slouch either. She nearly blushed as she thought back to that morning, to when she had went to waken Naruto. Half asleep, he had called her an angel. He thought she was beautiful. Too bad he probably didn't remember it, because he could have capitalized on that comment. She imagined those eyes of his again and that foxy grin. She smiled in spite of herself. She wanted to caress those whisker marks and rub his hair. She snickered at that thought. Something about him just reminded her of a fox kit, cute, pettable, and trusting. The snicker became a laugh. If she rubbed his belly and got him a bowl of ramen, he'd probably follow her around like a little lost puppy. She was beginning to like the idea of hanging out with Naruto more and more each second. It would definitely never be boring. Getting out of the bath, she toweled off and trudged to her room, stopping in front of her mirror and admiring her body in a different light. She wondered for a moment if Naruto liked girls like her and stopped cold. Why in the hell would she care what Uzumaki Naruto thought about her? He was a sweet guy, sure, lunch at the sushi bar had proven that, but he wasn't boyfriend material. Hell, on a good day, he could be just as, if not more than, annoying than Lee and Guy together. With the sunset genjutsu, these thoughts were stopping her from sleeping, she realized. With a growl and a promise to train Naruto into the ground the next day, Tenten rolled over and went to sleep. Hours prior to Tenten's going to sleep, Naruto stood watching her back as she walked away. He never had been so afraid and yet had never been so interested in anyone in his life. Shaking his head, he turned back and grasped his hammer, lifting it into the stance she taught him. Sanosuke stood there, silent, watching and waiting to give an opinion or help him adjust his stance. With Tenten no longer distracting him, however, Naruto was going through the motions with no problem. His hammer sat in front of him on the ground, the palm of his right hand resting on the end of the handle, the left hand held at its side. With a quick tap of the left hand, the hammer spun into the air and was quickly caught by Naruto, who twirled it around like a baton, striking it in a figure-8 motion before driving it head first into the ground, standing like he never moved. Sanosuke was more than surprised by this and made his surprise known. "Oi, Naruto. When Tenten was here, you were tripping over your own feet and now you've got the move mostly down. Don't tell me you were distracted by her tomboyish charm." Naruto had the good grace to blush, but his words were quite sharp and heated. "Shut up, it's not like that. I just calmed myself and remembered what she said, that's all. She's a really good teacher when she's not trying to kill you. Scary, yes, but a good teacher. I think I'll look forward to mastering everything she teaches me." He heard a snort come from behind him and turned to glare at Sanosuke, who had a wide grin on his face. "You think just because you did it right once that you've got it mastered? Idiot, there's a reason she's known as the weapons mistress of Konoha. That girl is a master of nearly every weapon out there. You, on the other hand, are a clod who has mastered one stance of a kenjutsu style. You don't even know what moves can be used to follow that one up, and I'm not totally convinced that you're doing that wasn't a fluke." "It wasn't a fluke. I did that perfectly." "No, you didn't. You overextended your knee when you twirled the hammer on the 5th rotation. You could have pulled your arm out of socket as off balance as you were. But the hammer's so light, it's like spinning a baton. It's light because it's an extension of you. I can ask Cammy to make it heavier if you're going to be such a smartass." No, that's all right. I'm sorry. I'm just going to continue my training now. You can go now. Tell me, Naruto, what are your plans for the future?" Naruto stopped in the middle of what he was doing and put both hands on the end of the handle, resting his chin on his hands. Pondering his words, he thought long and hard before answering. "I will do what Cammy needs me to do. Then I will live out the rest of my life for me and my soulmate. I have lived in the service of those who don't appreciate me for too long now. I promised Sakura that I would bring Sasuke back, and I intend to do that. An Uzumaki never breaks a promise. But you're the only Uzumaki, Naruto. Then that means that my children will carry my words into the future. It will be a matter of family honor that an Uzumaki never breaks his word." Sanosuke took this moment to give Naruto a pearl of wisdom that he would ponder upon for years to come. "Naruto, you've heard the stories about a demon and promises, right?" "Yeah, so. Naruto, your need to fulfill promises comes from the demon inside of you. It is one of the few noble traits he had. But whereas you will announce a promise and carry it out till the end, the Kyuubi never gave its word unless it could twist it to its advantage. That is why a demon will never promise anything unless it can get something out of it from the person it promised it to. But I never expected anything from Sakura. Yes you did, subconsciously you craved her love and attention. You wanted to bring Sasuke back out of the premise that she would love you. You made the promise on the thought that you would get something out of it. That's just the demon's nature in you. Sorry you had to hear it from me, but that's the way it is. If that's true, that I expect to get things for doing things, then what am I supposed to do for Tenten for these lessons? Sanosuke's grin threatened to split his face and he laughed before taunting Naruto and disappearing. Now that M-boy is part of the riddle. You've got to figure that out on your own. People within a quarter mile of the training grounds felt the impacts as Naruto tore into the ground with his hammer, making craters and swearing the whole time. Angels were so troublesome. Naruto arrived home a bit later than usual due to his training regimen. He had used the Kage Bunshin method to get that one stance down to an art form. The hammer flowed in his hands and he felt proud of his accomplishment. That is, until he remembered what Sanosuke said about pride in one technique. One technique does not a good ninja make, he thought to himself. Thumping the hammer down hard outside the stairwell, he made his way to his apartment. After fumbling with his keys for a bit, he managed to make it inside. For some reason, instead of feeling good to be home, he felt even more lonely than usual. He couldn't figure it out, but something was bothering him. He suddenly missed the companionship of another person, like a piece of him was missing. Perplexed, he heated some water and got a bowl of cup ramen from the cupboard. Stuffing the noodles into his mouth, he twisted and turned the problem in his head, but still came up with nothing. Perhaps it's another of Sanosuke's tests. He thought back to what Sanosuke had said before he disappeared and made no sense of that either. If a promise was supposed to net him something in return for his help, what was he supposed to give Tenten in return for hers? Growling furiously, he chunked the cup in the trash and stalked off to go to bed. He'd figure it out in the morning. Morning came, and Naruto found himself back at the training grounds, waiting for Tenten to show up. It wasn't rare for him to be the first one to arrive for anything, but he figured with Maida Guy as a sensei that she would have at least got there at the same time. Deciding to put the time he had to good use, he made a few Kage Bunshins and went to work on the stance. They all moved in synchronization and it made for a very interesting sight. It was like looking at a professional dance troupe except the dancers had big-ass hammers. Tenten apparently had a knack for showing up to see things that piqued her interest, because when she arrived she saw not one but 5 Narutos, all with hammers, performing the stance she taught him flawlessly. She watched, entranced, behind a tree. Now Tenten had thought she had seen it all. She's trained with a pompous Hyuga, 2 workaholics with masochistic tendencies, and fought a bunch of super-powered foes. Nothing should surprise her or make her stop in her tracks anymore. And yet, there she was, standing behind a tree like a certain Hyuga girl, watching as 5 Narutos performed the stance she taught in perfect harmony. When they finished, the ground shook from the hammers coming down and 4 disappeared, leaving just the original Naruto, who sat down beside his hammer and leaned against it in a huff. Speaking out loud, he asked the wind, "Man, where the hell is she? I thought at least Guy would have taught her punctuality. Just because she's a girl doesn't mean she can come and go as she pleases." Now Tenten had been admiring him from afar. He was certainly a catch and she was looking forward to lunch again, so that she could get those envious stares from other girls. But he had just insulted her, indirectly, and he wouldn't get away with that. Putting her mediocre genjutsu skills to work, she camouflaged herself and began to slink behind him. It only took a couple of minutes, but she soon stood right behind him, with a kunai drawn, ready to deliver her prank. She began to get worried when he began to sniff the air like an Inuzuka, but then he relaxed and she sprung her trap. Putting her arms around his shoulders and leaning on his back, she dispelled the genjutsu, while holding the kunai against his sensitive area. When she whispered in his ear, it sent shivers down his spine, but he maintained his cool the best he could. "You know, Naruto, you shouldn't talk to yourself when no one's around. Someone might hear what you say and do what I could do right now. Now then, let's see how high-pitched your voice can get." Before she could even move, she found herself hoisted into the air and every one of her limbs splayed out. Turning her head this way and that, she found that both legs and arms were held by Naruto clones. She looked over her stomach and saw the original Naruto spinning her kunai on the end of his finger. Naruto, let me down. This isn't funny. You're right, Tenten, it wasn't funny. You threatened to lop off my little buddy and that wasn't funny. Tickling the shit out of you is punishment, however, that's going to be funny. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. He poked her in her stomach and she stifled the giggle, but when he began to tickle her all over she lost it and began to writhe and gasp for breath. She hated being powerless against something as trivial as this, but then again she was secretly enjoying herself. She hadn't had this much fun in a long time. Naruto finally stopped his ministrations and let her catch her breath, before helping her to her feet. She tried to glare at him but the smile on her face wouldn't go away. Okay asshole, just for that I'm showing you 2 additional stances today and I expect you to be able to do them flawlessly before lunch, which, I might add, you are treating me to yet again. That's not fair. I treated you yesterday. Why don't you pay for yourself? Because you're supposed to be a gentleman and I am a lady. Naruto muttered under his breath that was debatable and earned himself a knock on the head that sent him face first into the ground. Luckily for Tenten, he didn't catch the grin on her face. Now then, you're going to pay for my lunch and that's that. Besides, only a few people have ever touched me outside of battle and lived. You should feel honored I haven't gutted you like a fish yet. Now get that overgrown mallet of yours and we'll get started. It's not a mallet, it's a hammer. It's going to be shoved up your ass sideways if you don't do as I say. Now get cracking. Bah, you can't even lift it to go through with that threat. Maybe, but I can shove this katana sideways. Now move. Eat. Yes ma'am. Unbeknownst to the two of them, Sanosuke sat in a tree off to the side, watching them with amusement. He had to resist the urge to chuckle at their antics and felt sorry for Naruto when he saw what the boy was going through at the moment. It was true, Tenten was a slave driver. Ought to be young again and in love, he thought, even if they don't know it yet. Chapter 4. Tenten sat on the ground with her katana leaning against her shoulder, panting. She looked across the training grounds at her current partner and sighed in frustration. He had done the katas perfectly after only a few times and a couple of clubs upside the head from her and the little punk was still going like he wasn't even winded. She huffed, and laid back on the ground. She trained for years with Gai-sensei and Lee, so why was it that Naruto, who trained with one of the laziest Junin out there, was such a fucking stamina freak? Even Lee would have passed out from exhaustion by now, mumbling in his sleep about the flames of youth. Feeling the thump of the hammer as it hit the ground, she looked up to see Naruto heading her way. Tenten couldn't help but be impressed constantly by the boy's physique. He wasn't as ripped as Lee, but he didn't have the body of a genius either. Naruto was a very good compromise between the two. Not relying entirely on power but not entirely on jutsu either, he had the faint outline of a six-pack. The fact that he was shirtless, saying he didn't want to ruin his GI, and had sweat glistening off his body only made him that much more attractive to Tenten. She always appreciated a hard-working man. Maybe that's why she quit seeing Neji in a romantic light a while ago. He simply didn't work as hard as her or Lee. Sure, he trained but he didn't do it until he was exhausted. She wearily looked up at the blonde and saw his lips moving. She turned red when she realized she had been admiring his body instead of listening to him. Lucky for her, the idiot didn't notice. Go get something to eat. Hey Tenten, I asked if you want to get something to eat. Yeah that sounds great. Where are we going? I don't know. You're the guest, you decide. As long as it's not sushi again. Spoil sport. Fine, let's see. No, maybe, I got it. Let's go to that barbecue joint that Choji frequents. What if Choji's there? You know they shut down when he comes in. Tenten just shrugged and stood up. Then we'll readjust our plans. Now let's go. She took 2 steps and fell flat on her face. She hadn't realized that she had used up most of her energy teaching Naruto and helping him with his forms. Dodging that damn hammer was harder than it looked once he had a small sense of direction on what to do with it. Naruto, meanwhile, was freaking out over what to do. Tenten, are you okay? I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to make you train me till you killed yourself. Please, come on, get up. Naruto, shut up. I'm not dead you idiot, I'm exhausted. You wore me out. Guess we won't be going to lunch. Naruto put on a big grin and swung his hammer to his back. After much cajoling he had convinced Sanosuke to make him a holder that could handle the strain of carrying the hammer, attached to his back. Tenten looked at him with interest and suddenly found herself being picked up bridal style and adjusted against his chest. A quick, eep, from her and a soft knock against his skull, and she looked up to find those silver stars again. I'm not passing up lunch because you can't walk. I'll carry you there. We'll probably make better time with me carrying you than normal anyway. You saying I'm slow? No, I'm saying you're slower than me. Now shut up and enjoy the ride. Naruto took off, running as fast as he could. Tenten slung her arms around his neck and decided to really enjoy the ride. He had put his GI back on and she buried her nose into his chest, inhaling his scent. It smelled different from every other guy's. It smelled of the forest and ramen, and yet it had another, underlying scent, one of danger and yet protectiveness. She found it intoxicating and found herself all too soon being sat down in a chair at the barbecue joint. The ride was overall too fast for her taste and she wondered if she could convince him to carry her again on the way back. It wasn't often that she got to act like a girl instead of a warrior and she rather liked the attention he lavished on her. He left momentarily to put his hammer outside and she ordered for him. I could really get used to this. Naruto, while carrying her, was also running a gamut of emotions. That tightening of the chest was back and having her in his arms felt comfortable and right, like she was meant to be there. He noticed that her body conformed to his almost perfectly and she was no burden at all to him. When she wasn't looking, had her face buried in his chest, he had leant down just a bit and sniffed her hair. It smelled like Tenten. He couldn't put it any other way, except that she had her own unique scent and no one else had it. It was comforting to him and pleasing. The run was too short for his taste also and he soon found himself lowering her into a chair and placing his hammer outside. He sighed on the way back in. Why couldn't all of his training sessions go as nice as these with Tenten? Small talk kept them occupied until their food arrived and both teens ate in silence, though both of their minds were running full throttle. They were beginning to become more comfortable with one another little by little. It's been said that you know you've found someone special when you can shut the fuck up and enjoy comfortable silence with each other. The one who said that obviously never met Naruto though. He doesn't know how to shut the fuck up for long. So Tenten, what's the deal with you and Neji? Did the two of you ever hook up? Tenten was slightly taken aback by this. It was such a sudden question and very straightforward. Just like Naruto. She thought. There's nothing between us, Naruto. Neji and I are just two different people and it wouldn't have worked. Even now that he's a better person and not so cold, he's still a pompous jackass on occasion. I gave up on him long ago. I'm sorry to hear that. What about Lee and Guy? How have they been? Tenten smiled when asked about her favorite teammate and her sensei. Guy sensei is all right. He's still as crazy as ever, but he's a good man at heart. Lee is your eternal rival Naruto. You should know how he is. Hee, well that's true. I haven't seen Lee lately though, since every time I come off a mission, I'm right back out in a few days. I've been focusing all my energy on getting Sasuke back, but I'm starting to rethink my actions on that. Tenten raised an eyebrow at that. Ever since Sasuke turned traitor, all Naruto had talked about was rescuing him. Now here he was saying he was re-evaluating that situation. Will wonders never cease? So what are you rethinking, Naruto? The approach to rescuing him or whether or not he wants to be rescues? Rescuing him at all? Well, that was a big surprise. Sasuke was an obsession to Naruto and to rethink anything about him was like moving a mountain. Tenten's response was intelligent and well thought out. Do what? I'm not worried about rescuing him anymore. If I bring him back, if I see him again, he's a dead man. I'll kill him, Tenten. I really will. He'll get no mercy from me. He'll get my pity, yes, but never my mercy. Not anymore. But Naruto, Sasuke was like a brother to you. You've said so yourself. How can you kill him? Because there comes a time when even brotherhood cannot stand in the way of ideals. Sasuke chose to break the ideals of the village in exchange for power he could have gotten here. We're on opposite sides of a war now, and whatever brotherly feelings I might have shared with him are gone now. But what about your promise to Sakura? A slow smile crossed Naruto's face, becoming something more of a maniacal grin, slightly scaring Tenten. That's the beauty of promises, Tenten. I only promised to bring Sasuke back to her. I never promised to bring him back alive. Besides that, I have to retrieve a tainted soul for Kami, and after that weird dream I had the other night, I have a certain idea of who it is." "What dream are you talking about, Naruto?" He told her about the dream and the way he saw Sasuke in the dream and the weird figure standing in his shadow who had to be Orochimaru. Tenten's eyes widened the more he described it in detail. "So you're really going to kill him? That's very, well, frankly it's disturbing, Naruto. We all grew up with Sasuke. You were part of the Rookie 9 with him. How can you grow up with someone and then want to kill them?" Naruto's visage turned dark, and for a moment Tenten saw him in a different light. He was a 16-year-old boy who had seen death more times than he wanted, had been betrayed more than anyone else, and had had his heart crushed constantly by those he loved. For that brief moment she saw him as the angel of death. And then he spoke. "Tell me, Tenten, what do we do with ninja who leave the village without permission?" "We brand them Nuke Nin and send out the Hunter Nin. Sasuke is a traitor and traitors deserve death. Plain and simple. No strings attached." "That's brutal, Naruto. But I also have to admit that it's very true. Sasuke shouldn't get preferential treatment because of who he is. But how are you going to explain this to Sakura?" "I'm not. She'll either accept it or she won't. Not my problem. Sakura is my teammate, but I can't let that get in the way of justice." Tenten cut her eyes around the restaurant and noticed that many had stopped eating and were listening intently to her and Naruto's conversation. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair and Naruto noticed this. He too cut his eyes around and decided it was time to move this conversation to more comfortable locales. He strode across the room, paid the bill, and scooped Tenten up again before walking outside. She turned bright red when he scooped her up but didn't put up a fight. He didn't even swing his hammer to his back, just told her to hold onto his neck while he shifted an arm under her butt and they took off. Back at the training grounds, Tenten was sat down against a tree and Naruto sat in front of her, leaning against his hammer. The mood from the restaurant was kind of ruined and they were looking to strike back up the conversation. Tenten, desperate to end the silence, just blurted out the first thing she could think. "Why did you make that promise to Sakura?" She watched as Naruto seemed to disappear into himself, but his eyes remained open and the stars in his eyes took on an ethereal glow. She was about to shake him to see if he'd fallen asleep when the light in his eyes came back and he looked at her with a small smile. "Tenten, I made that promise because I wanted her to be happy. Or at least that's why I thought I made it. Sanosuke told me earlier that my need to fulfill promises comes from the demon in me, that it was one of his noble traits. All these years, I've thought it was me just being a nice guy and here I find it's the demon influencing me. But it's a noble trait, right? So why is something noble bad? Sasuke's Avenger thing is supposed to be noble. Seppuku is supposed to be noble. Making promises with the intent that you get something out of it isn't noble. I don't consider any of the other noble reasons all that noble either. But Naruto, you've never been malicious about anything. And I've heard you make promises before. You never ask for anything out of them. You make them because you're a good person and you want people to be happy. Besides, I happen to like that quality about you. You're an honest person." While Naruto was gaping at her, Tenten was thinking to herself. She wondered why she said that when she could hardly say she knew Naruto. But there was an underlying want to know him. That irrational need to get to know him. She was starting to see the boy in a whole new light and she was liking what she saw. She was startled out of her thoughts by Naruto's small voice. Do you really mean that, Tenten? I've never had anyone say that to me before. Of course I meant it. It's one of your endearing qualities, Naruto. I think my strength is back now. We can continue this conversation later. Let's get back to training. By the end of the day, with the help of Tenten and a crap load of cage bunchins, Naruto knew a whole style and only needed repetition to gain mastery of it. Tenten was once again in awe of the boy and his ability to learn. She asked him to teach her the cage bunchin and he acquiesced, but she couldn't make more than 2 at a time. She was about to go into a full-blown pout, when Lee came over the horizon, waving like a maniac. Ten, we must go to meet Guy-sensei. He has gotten us a mission to protect a nobleman and has said it will improve our flames of youth tenfold. Oh hello, Naruto. How have you been? Pretty good Lee. Next time I see you I expect a spar, okay? Yosh Naruto. I will most definitely find you when we return for our spar. Train my friend so that our flames of youth will burn brightly. Sure thing Lee. Tenten, thanks for all your help. I'll continue training in this style until I have it mastered. I guess I'll see you later. Take care. Naruto began to walk away with his hammer on his shoulder, thinking that his training with Tenten was over. It saddened him greatly, the thought did, but he couldn't figure it out. Tenten watched his back, the same feeling running through her, before shouting his name, making him stop, and jogging over to him. Look Naruto, I enjoyed myself these past couple of days. I really did. When I get back, if you're here, would you like to continue our training? Really? You mean it? Hell yeah, I want to continue this. Good. Good. I want you to continue working that style, got it? Oh, and Naruto. Yeah, I want you to promise me something. Naruto looked at her with wide eyes. Hadn't they just talked about promises and him? Before he could go any deeper into thought, she was beside him, whispering in his ear, with a wide grin on her face. I want you to promise me that when I get back, you'll take me on a date. A real date. No ramen, no training clothes, just you, me, and a nice restaurant. What do you say? Would you like that? Naruto just nodded dumbly, his eyes wide. Lee looked on, intrigued, since he couldn't hear the conversation. He was shocked when Tenten leaned in and pecked Naruto on the cheek, turning the boy blood red before she bounded off and grabbed Lee's arm, pulling him along in shock and confusion. Tenten had never been that forward before with any boy, and Lee's mind was running a mile a minute to decipher what it meant. Being innocent, gullible Lee, however, he just couldn't grasp any reason. In matters of the heart, Lee was almost as, if not more clueless, than Naruto. Tenten offered no answers however, and they left off for their mission. Naruto was stunned to say the least. He had a pretty trainer, who was willing to show him things. She was more patient with him than anyone since Iruka, and she had just asked him out on a date. He'd never been on a date before. What did people do on dates? He'd have to ask Iruka about that. In the meantime, he might as well go back to mastering her style. He created 100 cage bunchins and they all got to work. He'd ponder on this later tonight. Unbeknownst to him, Sanosuke sat in a tree, watching and hearing everything. He disappeared without a sound, reappearing in Tenten's living room. He could hear her packing and stomped on the floor to let her know he was there. Her answer was to hurtle 2 kunai, which lodged in his chest. He frowned and pulled the kunai out, handing them to a mildly pissed Tenten. He rubbed his chest and fingered the holes in his robe again. You know, Naruto put these exact same holes in my shirt that you did. You two definitely are two of a kind. So, did you figure out the riddle? I did. I'm not sure that Naruto has. After he told me that story, especially the part about his soulmate teaching him kenjutsu, I pieced it together. When he explained the dream, I knew it was me. Tell me Sanosuke, how can he be that dense about things? Is he really that dumb? It's not that he's dumb, Tenten. He just believes, deep down, that he doesn't deserve such a thing as love. Not from a girl and not in the sense of a lover. His sense of self-worth is very low from earlier in his life. But you can change all that. You can be what he's always needed. Tenten took all this in while she continued packing. What do you think about his view on Sasuke? Is he right, Sanosuke? Are there some souls that are too far gone as to not be worth saving? No. Souls are always worth saving. But there are still rules that mortals must follow so that there will be no blemishes on their souls. Loyalty, honor, respect, trust, love. These are things that must be followed. If someone is your master, you must do as they say, without question. To go against your master, unless with due cause, shows that you have none of the noble qualities and therefore you forfeit your right to have a say whether you live or die. Sasuke is not the soul Naruto must purge, but he may be caught in the crossfire. It is inevitable. Orochimaru. Thought Tenten. So what can we do to ensure that Naruto doesn't kill Sasuke if he's innocent? Sanosuke's face darkened and for a second, Tenten was reminded of Naruto. Sasuke is not innocent. He chose to go and follow a darker path for power. Avenging your family at the cost of your own life is not something that is noble. It is foolhardy. Naruto is correct. Sasuke cannot be forgiven for his crimes. It is a shame that one such as Naruto may have to stain his hands with the blood of one he considered friend, but in the shinobi world, such things must come to pass. What is my role in all this? Whatever you choose, Tenten. Your role is what you make of it. Unlike your friend Neji thinks, there is no such thing as fate. It is a crutch that the weak hide behind when they cannot change anything. All I ask is that you be yourself and try to help him. Tenten turned around and smiled at Sanosuke. I'll do one better. No matter what life brings at us, I'll stand by him. I'm going to make him work for me. I won't just stand by him because we are bound at the soul. That's why I told him we're going on a date, because I don't want him to think I'm just going to be with him because Kami said so. He wants me, he has to show me he wants me. I think Kami will like you, Tenten. I know I do. Make Naruto sweat a little bit before the two of you get serious. You'll appreciate it more later in life. Her smile turned into a sadistic grin. Who says I'm going to make him stop sweating ever? I like the little dunce, but if he's going to be with me forever, I want him on his toes all the time. I don't want a boring soulmate. I want him to challenge me as well. And with Naruto and that mouth of his, I know I'll never be bored and I'll never have to worry about being cheated on because he's so fiercely loyal. TCH, listen to me, I'm starting to sound like he's caught me already. More than you'll ever know, thought Sanosuke. Aw crap, I'm gonna be late. Bye Sanosuke. Tell Kami I said hi. She was out the door like a shot and Sanosuke disappeared. He appeared in front of Kami and knelt. So what do you think of her, Kami-sama? She is an interesting girl. She'll definitely keep that knucklehead in line. And when they both come here, I'll have two fine angels to serve me, as you have. Do you think Naruto will be alright with his path? Will it darken his soul? Kami turned and put her gaze on Sanosuke. It wasn't often she focused on any one thing and now all her attention was on him. I think he will do what is right. He will do what I asked, nothing more. Naruto is not a vengeful person, but he does know right and wrong. He will be fine. His village will accept him for who he is, and when he receives his final gift, it will make him all the more loved. Was it wise to have me tell him about the demon like that? It served its purpose. It made him stop and think about that ridiculous promise he made to Haruno Sakura all those years ago. A promise is fine, but one shouldn't have to be killed over something so childish. Mortals all make their own path in life. Naruto has chosen a path of light, Sasuke chose one of darkness. The two must combat each other to see which prevails, and in the end, we will see who had the most conviction. My soldier or the tainted one's vessel. The whole week that Tenten was gone, Naruto did nothing but train and meditate. He didn't seek out Sakura nor did he try to find Kakashi. This disturbing lack of regular annoyance is what led the two on a village-wide search for the blonde. They found him at their regular training field, rearranging the landscape while using his finally mastered style taught to him by Tenten, the dance of the swirling pool. It worked well with Naruto's hammer as it used a lot of misdirection and downward strikes. He twirled the massive chunk of metal around his body, thrusting it forward, using the spike to make his imaginary opponent jump back before pivoting on his heel and swinging the hammer up and over in a crescent moon swipe. He brought the hammer back down after a twirling figure 8 and dropped it in front of him with both hands on the end of the handle. Sakura and Kakashi stood spellbound, while their teammate danced, oblivious to them. Sakura was the first to shake off her stupor and marched forward to get his attention. When she tapped him on the shoulder, she found herself face to face with the business end of his hammer. Fear was quickly overcome by anger as she responded in her usual way. "You idiot. Watch where the hell you're pointing that overgrown mallet." When she went to punch him in the head, however, all she hit was thin air and she stumbled, nearly falling. Looking around, she saw him standing sideways on a nearby tree, his hammer on his shoulder. "Nay, that wasn't nice, Sakura-chan. You shouldn't sneak up on people and then accuse them of things." "I'll do more than accuse you, you idiot. I heard from Tsunade Shisho that you found a new toy. Kakashi-sensei and I came to see what it was." "Where did you get that?" "Kami." That made both Kakashi and Sakura stop. After a moment of silence, Sakura burst out laughing and Kakashi's eye crinkled up into a smile. Naruto, on the other hand, had the same unreadable expression on his face that he'd had since they arrived. Kakashi decided that he wanted a real answer. Okay Naruto, where did you really get it? Kami. Kami gave it to me. It's a holy hammer. Only I can wield it. He heard Sakura snort, for some reason that pissed him off more than usual. Tenten hadn't scoffed at him when he told her. He scowled and held the hammer out. Okay then Miss Medic Nin. You're the stronger of the two of us, correct? Then lift up this hammer from the ground. Use whatever means necessary and then I'll show you up by lifting it with one hand. He dropped the hammer and it landed with a loud boom, and their eyes flew wide. Sakura looked from Naruto to the hammer and back again, but put her smirk back on and reached for the weapon. No matter how hard she pulled, tugged, cursed, screamed, or pumped chakra into her arms, she couldn't budge it. She huffed in annoyance and crossed her arms over her chest. Think you're so smart, huh? Smirking like you can take on the world. Why don't you lift the damn thing then? Sakura, you've seen me lift it. You saw me use it. I don't need to prove anything, but if you insist. As soon as he picked up his hammer, Kakashi was upon him, throwing a kunai at his head. Naruto dropped his hammer to the ground and placing his right palm on the end of the handle, maneuvered it to block the kunai. As soon as the clang was heard, Kakashi rushed him and his eye opened wide when, instead of going in blindly, Naruto stood calm and collected, as if analyzing the situation. When Kakashi was with 6 paces, he tapped the side of the hammer with his left hand and spun it around, taking a swipe at Kakashi, who dodged with a back flip. Kakashi re-evaluated the situation, watching as Naruto stood ready, his left foot in front, his right arm extend, palm open, his hammer behind in a tight grip. The boy had gotten better, that was a definite. His stance was solid and if Kakashi didn't know better, he'd think that Naruto had gotten smarter. More tactile. Perhaps it was just the way he carried himself. It was annoying. Usually he could read Naruto like an open book, but now he was guarded and that stance left too much to the imagination. Deciding that he didn't want to risk anything, he lifted his Hitai 8, exposing the Sharingan. To his surprise, Naruto didn't flinch. It was like the boy had experience beyond his years. Tell me Kakashi-sensei, who besides Guy, has the most experience dealing with the Sharingan. Kakashi was taken aback by this but quickly regained his composure. It wouldn't do for his subordinates to think that they could surprise him that easily. I don't know Naruto. Why don't you enlighten me? It's me Kakashi-sensei. I have the most experience in fighting the Sharingan. And I can tell you right now that that eye of yours is no match for my stamina or strength. I'm tired of being pushed around and I have the resolve to go through with what I must do. And what is that Naruto? Bring back Sasuke. Kakashi and Sakura smiled and nodded their heads, until he spoke again. Dead or alive? Tenten had just returned from her mission, and while it had been successful, she wanted nothing more than to see Naruto again. She was ready to train with him again, and was more than ready for her date. She was not ready, however, to see a very red-faced Sakura screaming at a stoic Naruto, nor was she prepared to see Kakashi with his headband up and his Sharingan spinning angrily. Deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, she suppressed her chakra and hid behind a tree, listening to the ensuing argument. What the hell do you mean, dead or alive, Naruto? Sasuke has to come back alive. You promised me that we'd bring him back. I promised you that I'd bring him back, Sakura. I never agreed to help you bring him back. And I never promised to bring him back alive. I've made a decision that I will no longer actively seek Sasuke. If I come across him, all the better, but I have other things that require my attention, more important things. What could be more important than getting our friend back, Naruto? Divine justice. My work is the right hand of Kami. Sakura stared at him in disbelief, and then set her jaw. Listen to you, Naruto. You sound like a self-important jackass. Divine justice. Right hand of Kami. For Kami's sake, Naruto, you sound like Sasuke. You sound like Sasuke, Naruto. That's not you. Don't presume to know me, Kakashi. You might be my sensei, but that is in word only. You have never been a sensei to me. Your pet project ran off and you gave him the tools to do it. Now it's my job to pick up the mess. I have a task given to me by Kami, and if Sasuke happens to get in my way, I will not hesitate to take him down. I'm tired of having to heal Chidori holes in my chest. This isn't right, Naruto. You can't go back on a promise. You're right, Sakura. I can't go back on a promise. That's my way. But other people seem to have no problem breaking promises to me, so I shall no longer give my word to those who I deem unfit to have it. He suddenly lifted his nose and sniffed the air. That was a familiar scent and it made him smile. He turned back to his still stunned teammates and gave them a curt bow. If you'll excuse me, my Kenjutsu trainer is here again and I must get back to training. I have much to learn from her, and the more I dally, the more upset she will be. Good day. They watched as he walked off into the forest and Kakashi slid his headband back down over his eye. Kakashi-sensei, when did Naruto get such an extensive vocabulary? And why is he acting like this? I believe that something happened to him between our last mission and his awakening Sakura. Perhaps he had an epiphany. After all, every time we meet Sasuke, he tries to kill Naruto. I know, but that's because he's messed up because of the curse seal. He can't help it. Maybe. Or maybe Naruto doesn't believe that anymore. I think we should drop the subject around him for the time being. Let's go. I think we should talk to Hokage-sama about this. Tenten was impressed with how Naruto handled himself. He had remained calm and collected, hadn't blown his top, and hadn't ripped their heads off even if she really wanted to. As he went by her, she grabbed his arm and he gave her a small smile. Hello Tenten. How was your mission? It was all right. We got back in record time. I saw that little exchange, by the way. I'm sorry you had to see that. I hope you aren't upset with me. Why would I be upset with you? I agree with you. Well, that's a surprise. Seems the day is full of them, thought Naruto. So Naruto, are you ready for our date? Yeah, about that. I've never been on a date before. What do we do? You've never been on a date before. Geez Naruto, what have you been doing all your life? Tenten, I don't mean to spoil your teasing, but think for a second who you're talking to. Who would date me knowing what I am? She reflected on this and found the logic sound. Really, who would date the holder of the Kyuubi? A wry smile crossed her face and she made her move. I would. He just looked at her slack-jawed. Really? You mean it? Of course I mean it. Why do you think I asked you in the first place? I don't know. Sigh, because I like you. You're a funny guy. You're interesting. And you're cute to boot. I get a lot of jealous looks when I'm with you. Naruto just stood there, his brain overloading. Now then, go home and get ready. Dress nice and come prepared to knock my socks off. Think casual, but formal. Show me a good time. Make me feel special. I'll help you along, but it's up to you to make me feel like I don't want the night to end. Now get going. Naruto merely nodded dumbly and walked off, his hammer dragging behind him. Tenten giggled and sped off to her apartment to get ready herself. She wanted to look gorgeous for tonight. If all goes as planned, we'll both be turning heads. Hee, tonight is going to be perfect. That was part 1 of What If Naruto Died at the Valley of the End and returned with Kami's divine hammer and Tenten as his true love. If you like this twist, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fan Fiction for more epic Naruto What If stories.